Many hold the belief that on a long enough timeline, all fiat currencies eventually go to zero. Mitigating this fear is a fundamental use case of hard capped cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Cardano. We currently live in a world where the West has banded together to destroy the ruble to deter Russian aggression in Ukraine. Simultaneously, parts of the West seem intent on destroying their own fiat through arguably self imposed inflation out of fear of crashing their own markets. It's now possible that new central bank digital currencies may be the only escape hatches left for these governments if things go too far. The remaining question is, where would these types of seismic economic shifts leave crypto and Cardano?
جاهزين؟ هنروح.
Big thanks to Mishari Alferez for that intro today. We're going to talk about the corner that the Federal Reserve seems to be backed into and how this could affect the interplay down the road between central bank digital currencies and crypto. We'll also talk about what could be equally important seismic shifts in tokenization and DAOs. We'll also discuss announced U.S. legislative attempts that might cut against whatever comes out of the Biden executive order. I genuinely hope these videos are bringing you value, and if they are, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. In case you were wondering how bad inflation is in the US, here's how bad. While the rest of the world is preoccupied with wondering about the disruptions to the global economic system caused by the exclusion of Russia, Jay Powell says they're still going to raise rates later this month. And he did the whole song and dance where he says, hey, we're just going to provide you with whatever level of clarity we have, and then we'll proceed to implement those policies carefully and nimbly, in his words, so they can be flexible as plans meet the real world. So, of course, he's doing the typical Fed thing where he leaves some wiggle room so they can adjust for changing circumstances. And he also says they don't really know how high the price of oil is going to go. But he points out that the U.S., our economy, does not have large interactions with the Russian economy, unlike certain parts of Europe. He says it's a relatively small thing, and it's gotten smaller and smaller in recent years. So there wouldn't be direct effects from these sanctions against Russia. But at the same time, he says it's hard to think what the second order effects might be. He points out that they are fully prepared to move more aggressively than 25 basis points at meetings this year. So it appears that curbing inflation is definitely priority number one for the Fed right now. The struggle with inflation that all central banks constantly seem to be involved in is very pertinent for Cardano holders and for all of crypto. One of the most persuasive original arguments for Bitcoin that was true back in the early days of Bitcoin and is still true today is that hard capped cryptocurrencies prevent central banks from doing this manipulation of the money supply that can lead to things like your savings inevitably becoming worth less and less and less. And we've kind of seen this over the history of the human relationship with units of account that we've had since we've had these fiat currencies, these currencies that don't have any rarity of their own and can be, readily manipulated by the issuer, the central banks in modern times, that the unit of account is inflated, sometimes slowly and then often rapidly, as the government or governing power of whatever type attached to that issuer needs to pay off debts. Because it seems like what we've had is governments and rulers always seem to go into debt. They always favor taking on debt to engage in some kind of expansion, whether it was back in the old times, whether it was, funding their armies so they could invade neighboring lands, or today, and I guess it's kind of still true today with Ukraine, but or today more likely just funding expansion of the economy. With most Western nations, it's like funding expansions in the economy through debt or funding, social welfare programs, expansion of those programs through debt, all these kinds of things. They're constantly running a deficit. And the way they pay off those debts, or one thing they do to help them pay off those debts, or just stay level with those debts or not have the debts increase as fast as they possibly could is expand the money supply so that there's more money out there and the debts are actually worth less. They're easier to pay off. Unfortunately, if you're a citizen in one of these nations, you're also probably holding a lot of your personal net worth in that fiat currency or some amount, anyways. Most people have some form of savings or they aspire to have savings, but those savings become worth less and less and less every single day. So, of course, Bitcoin having this hard capped limit of 21 million, Cardano having a hard capped limit of 45 billion. We won't go into the many Gen 3 competitor chains that don't have hard caps, but Cardano is definitely sort of a spiritual successor to Bitcoin in many ways, including having this hard cap. You don't have this problem. In fact, you see the opposite. Over the course of the existence of Bitcoin, we've seen nothing but the opposite of inflation. Each Bitcoin has become worth more and more and more. Unfortunately, this is not the property of cryptocurrencies that is so attractive to central banks. Instead, they like sort of the digital nature of cryptocurrencies. They can see how, I mean, you could argue that our fiat currencies are already largely digital in practice. The way we actually deal with them, they're largely digital already. But with central bank digital currencies, the piece of crypto that banks envy, the piece they want to copy, is the complete digital control over the currency. There is no fiat outlet. There is no possibility of someone hoarding actual cash dollars under their bed. It's all digital. They can control it however they want. We've talked in the past about the sort of behavioral economics they could engage in, and we'll probably talk a lot more about that in the future. But for now, it's enough to know that they like a lot of things about crypto, but the hard cap is not one of them. They want a version of digital assets that they can still manipulate just like they manipulate fiat now. There are many reasons for the Fed to put a huge amount of effort into controlling inflation right now. But I think only adding to the incentives to get inflation under control is that the Fed realizes that the CBDC they want to launch is going to be in a direct showdown with public blockchain hard capped cryptocurrencies. And I don't think they want the American public to go through this period of hyperinflation right before they try to sort of foist a CBDC upon them. Because I think if that happens, I mean, I'm not saying we're not already in a period of hyperinflation, because we certainly are, but I don't think they want it to get any worse right before they try to get everybody over to the, at least the psychological realm of CBDCs, because people will just say, hey, this new CBDC, it appears to be exactly like fiat in that you guys can expand the money supply whenever you want. I think they're going to do everything they possibly can to ease the way for CBDCs, because they already know they're firstly going to be in direct competition with stable coins, but they've also got to worry about regular public blockchain, hard capped cryptocurrencies, because that's the one quality of crypto they don't want to incorporate in their CBDCs. Another seismic shift we're probably going to experience over the next several years is the rise of DAOs. I know you're thinking we've had DAOs for a long time. The DAO hack happened a long time ago now. I think those of us who are in crypto all lived through that. It's been a long time now. It's sort of considered ancient history, given the speed that crypto evolves. But I think we're going to enter a new stage in the birth of DAOs. And I think it's because the DAO has sort of become the de facto way to, it's at least perceived as a de facto way to opt out of a lot of the regulation that would be imposed on you if you're doing the same thing in the legacy systems. We've seen this widespread tokenization in DeFi. All kinds of financial products have been tokenized, and the perceived go-to strategy to avoid the kinds of regulation that people are afraid of is by making the entity doing the tokenization a DAO, a decentralized entity, a decentralized autonomous organization. But I think we're going to enter a new stage of tokenization. Another seismic shift will be the tokenization of not just financial products, but real world assets. I think this could be led by tokenization of real estate, which again would in the legacy system be called securitization of real estate. But again, the perceived way to avoid that label and all of the regulation that people fear would be to do it through a DAO. So we've got this very strong nexus between DAOs and tokenization. And I still do believe, even regardless of the tokenization issue, that DAOs have a non-negligible chance of replacing corporations as the means through which we do commerce. It seems like it's too efficient. It's too efficient an organization compared to corporations. We've talked about that before on the channel. I've done a whole video just on sort of the lean efficiency of DAOs compared to the corporate waste that I think a lot of us are familiar with in the Western world. But I think that trend towards DAOs and society sort of understanding the efficiency of DAOs is only going to be compounded by this other trend towards tokenization. And as we move towards tokenization, if the regulatory framework, I mean the entire regulatory framework, isn't overhauled, if Biden's executive order doesn't lead to a complete overhaul and brand new frameworks for crypto, we're going to see continuation of this trend towards DAOs because people are going to want to tokenize more and more real world assets. It's just too great a bonus, a boon for liquidity when you can tokenize something like a house. And it definitely cuts against the current regulatory framework. There's not really a place for that outside of REITs and some other small exceptions, but the tokenization of a house is going to be a brand new thing that really should require a brand new regulatory framework. And if we don't get that, as a result of Biden's executive order and all the reports that come out of it, and probably the next 10, 15 years of regulatory evolution, and we're going to see this compounding effect where there's a trend toward DAOs just because they're more efficient, but there's also going to be a trend toward DAOs because there's going to be more and more tokenization of real world assets. And the only regulatory, at least perceived regulatory escape hatch is to do it through a decentralized autonomous organization instead of a traditional entity. On top of all that, you might even see people preferring DAOs because they'll be easily tradable in a unit of account that's a public blockchain hard capped crypto, as opposed to these easily manipulable central bank digital currencies. Of course, this is all just an attempt to look into the future. And even though we don't know which direction things are necessarily going to go, it does feel like we're on the cusp of certain big seismic shifts because maybe the system for organizing commerce in the developed world has run its course and it's time for the next evolution. But we don't even know what's going to happen in the present. Biden just released his executive order, which asks for a series of reports, which are probably going to set the tone for the direction the regulatory agencies are going to go moving forward on crypto regulation. But the executive branch isn't the only game in town. There's also a legislative branch in the United States, and they might get to have their say on crypto as well. Here we have Senator Cynthia Lummis, a longtime ally of crypto, saying it's been a long time coming, but my bill to fully integrate digital assets into our financial system is almost ready. I'm putting the final touches on it with some key advocates and partners in the Senate, but watch out for an unveiling soon. This is interesting because if this is a bill to fully integrate digital assets into our financial system, there's a good chance it's going to cut against some things that the executive branch regulatory agencies would probably want to chime in on. So who knows? I mean, we're talking about the US Senate here. So who knows what the chances of this or anything that looks like this actually making it into law are. We have checks and balances for a reason. And there's a good chance the composition of the legislative branch could change greatly in November. So no matter what comes out of this 180-day period with the agency reports, there's still Congress. So this is already going to be kind of a complicated little dance. And we've also got the judicial branch, the courts, who could shoot down anything at any point down the road. What I'm trying to get at is the executive order isn't the only thing happening. There's going to be a lot of chaos as we try to get something that looks like a comprehensive regulatory framework on crypto. And it's probably going to take a long time. And there's a lot of different players here. So I hope everybody's ready for that level of chaos. I hope you're also going to have an awesome weekend. Hope you've got great, fun plans. And I will talk to you soon.